is it possible to have brand loyalty when people are maybe only visiting one time?
Yeah, well, I suppose by definition, the answer is no if they only ever visit one time. But you want to
Yeah.
create a preference for them to come back and maybe instigations for them to come back, as well as to tell other people about it so other people come back. And one of the best ways of doing that is to get very personal with them. It's also better if you go up this sort of progression of memorable to meaningful to transporting to transformative. And
Yeah.
particularly if you are somebody where they had a transformation, right? That's just not a memory, right? You've changed them. And that's going to be a deep impact on their psyche that's going to make them want to come back. In fact, you can think about how do I like bolster that by why you come back, and then we'll recharge that transformation that you had. We'll help you boost you to the next transformation that you want. I think then it becomes easier as well.
Welcome to the Best Part of Travel podcast, brought to you by Arival, where we take you inside the business of destination experiences. I'm Janelle Visser, and I'm here with Steve and Joyce.
Hi.
And today we're going to be talking about what's next for travel experiences. For quite a few years now, people have been choosing experiences over things. And that's good news for tour activity and attraction operators. But what happens when experiences become things? In today's episode, we're going to speak to Joe Pine, who literally wrote the book on the experience economy. And we're going to get into commoditization, experience design, and how to attract tomorrow's travelers by making your travel experiences not just memorable, but transformational. So, to kick things off, Stephen, what's one small thing you've learned from traveling that has changed how you live your life?
I don't know if it's a small thing. It's something I actually learned very early on when I was quite young, when we traveled as a family. And it was really, it was empathy. It was the idea that we are all the same everywhere in the world. Like we have our differences, we have different cultures, we have different foods and whatever, but at our core, we're all really the same. And that's something that I've seen through all my travels is that is the human element, right? The fact that we are all people and we all share very similar things. And I carry that with me everywhere I go, whenever I travel, is to kind of lead with that sort of human first approach. That's something I learned very, very early on. So I don't know. That's not a small thing.
Yeah,
It's just a very foundational thing.
Yeah, I love that.
How about you?
Yeah, for me, again, probably not a small thing, but it is something that I learned along the way of traveling that I try to take with me into life, which is to not leave things for someday, like that hypothetical someday in the future. And I used to do that. I used to, if I was nervous or afraid, I would just say, you know what, I'll do this someday. It doesn't have to be today. But when you're traveling, you might only ever be in a certain place with a certain group of people in a certain time. You're never going to be there again. Even if you go back to that place, it's not the same. And so I remember very clearly this moment where I was in New Zealand on a group tour, and our guide said that we had this opportunity to jump off this like suspension bridge type thing into these blue pools. And it was so cool. It was so beautiful. And it was a little bit scary. And I really wanted to do it, but I wasn't feeling very well. And so I was making excuses for myself. And I was like, yeah, you know what? I'll just come back someday and do it then. And then I caught myself and I was like, Janelle, when are you ever going to be here again? And even if you don't even know where you are. And even if you find your way back here, you're not going to be with this group of like amazing, supportive people. You're going to be chasing a memory. And so I just pulled it together and was like, I'm doing this regardless of how I feel. And I did it, and it was amazing and one of the best memories from the whole trip. And so since that point, I think of that anytime I have the impulse to say, I'll do this some other time, I'll do this someday, and catch myself and think of those blue pools in New Zealand. So I think
the old "I'll do it next time." It's like there may not be a next time, and I love that. That's so great, Janelle.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah, so we could, I'm sure, share so many stories about the ways that travel has changed us. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today with Joe, is this idea of transformational travel, not just
Hmm.
making memories, but going beyond that to travel that changes you in some way and has a lasting impression. And we know this. People have traveled for decades or longer to find themselves and find some way of changing something about their life. But how do you approach that from an experience design perspective?
Hmm.
So we're going to get into that conversation, but first we're going to take a quick break.
Protect Group offers a service called Refund Protect. The way it works is that an operator or reseller offers Refund Protect at the time of checkout for an extra fee, usually around 10% of the ticket price. If the guest can't go because of some unforeseen circumstance, they request a refund through Refund Protect and they get 100% of their money back. The best part is the operator keeps 100% of their revenue and they make a little extra. So, to find out more, go to protect.group/best part of travel.
Okay, so our guest today, Joe Pine, he co-authored the Experience Economy book with James Gilmore, and that's why I said he literally wrote the book on the experience economy because he did. Joe Pine is also going to be a keynote speaker at the upcoming Arrival conference in Washington D.C.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with the book?
I am, yeah. And I think it might be worthwhile for everyone listening to have, if you haven't read the book, just to kind of give you a quick, sort of brief summary on what the book is about, some of its key takeaways, so that as we
Yeah.
continue this conversation with Joe, at least you have some context. Does that make
Let's
sense?
yeah, let's do that because in the interview we don't talk too much about the experience economy book, but it's kind of there as the foundation of
Mhm.
the conversation. So, what were some of your key takeaways from the book?
Well, the core premise of the book is that our economy has gone through kind of four stages, starting out with an agrarian economy. So something, like farming, mining, where we extract commodities, from natural resources from the ground or wherever. And then we evolved into an industrial economy where things are made, right? We take those resources and we make things out of them. And then it evolved into a service economy where we deliver services. And then we have moved into now an experience economy where businesses are orchestrating memorable events for their customers. So it's not just about selling a service or a product anymore, it's about bundling that with some kind of experience. So,
Well, and it's not just about tourism either, right?
no,
Like he
no,
gives a
this is
number of
this is across the
examples.
board. Yeah, it's everything. It's, it could be hotels, it could be airlines, it could be Apple, it could be coffee, like Starbucks, for example. He
Yeah.
uses Starbucks as an example, but really like any coffee shop. So you and I go to a coffee shop for our weekly meetup here in Vancouver. And I would say that's an experience, right? Like we go there, we don't just go there for the coffee. We go there for the ambiance. We go there because we know the staff and the clientele there, are really cool and it's a really cool vibe.
Well,
That
and they put
is,
on events.
they
Yeah.
put on events, right?
Mhm.
They try to keep people engaged and they've built almost a community around it. And that in and of itself is the idea of experience economy, that they're not just selling coffee, they're selling an experience. And so that it goes beyond tourism, it goes into all kinds of other things as well. So some of the key takeaways are that experiences are distinct offerings. So it's not something that's just extra, it's something that is sold at a premium, right? With Starbucks, you pay more for your coffee than you do at, say, McDonald's or Tim Hortons, but you're getting that premium experience with it. Although that's
I would
with
say
with
they
inflation, it's not
okay.
necessarily true these days, but
They things are getting expensive everywhere. But
things are
yeah, I
definitely
hear
getting
you. I
insane.
hear you. Yeah.
Yeah. The second sort of key takeaway is that customization is essential, right? So customizing an experience for an individual is becoming more and more important because the customers aren't just consumers. They're not just consuming the product. They are now participants, right? So they are actively participating in whatever that experience is. The third sort of key takeaway is that staging is critical. So it's almost like creating a theater event or a performance that the interaction is intentionally designed and almost scripted, right? So when we think about the Johnny Walker experience that we did in Edinburgh, right? like just that whole experience, the way that it was scripted and intentionally designed, that is a very good example of experience design in practice. And then he talks about the economic value of it, of experiences, going from a commodity, which is like the lowest form, to a good, so a manufactured good, to a service, to an experience, to transformation. So that kind of ties into his next book, The Transformation Economy. So that kind of gives you a good idea of the overall gist of his book. The
Yeah.
the the main one being that businesses really have to rethink how they sell and make experiences or build experiences into everything that they do in order to really make the product valuable or the service valuable.
Yeah. And so this book was written
In 99,
1999, I want to
yeah,
say. So it's
yeah.
quite a while ago now that he put
Hmm.
these ideas out there and put labels on them. And our industry has exploded since then. The experiences sector, it's huge. And so the new book coming out, he's going to talk about this in the interview about transformation, is kind of that idea of the next step. Like, what's the next step after commodities, goods, services, experiences? What comes next? And it parallels really interestingly with the research that we've been doing at Arrival, because Arrival research is showing, people are very interested in experiences. Younger travelers are particularly interested in experiences that really speak to their passions
Hmm.
and, these really more niche experiences. They don't just want to tick things off a bucket list anymore. They want to have experiences that are meaningful and personal to them.
Hmm.
And that's a big ask for an experience provider, to not just provide, a memorable experience where you get nice photo ops, but an experience that has the potential to change people's lives. Like, that's a big
Yeah.
deal. That's not a small ask. And so I love the conversation with Joe where we talk about this. So let's jump to the conversation with Joe. All right. So, Joe, you literally wrote the book on the experience economy. I have it right here.
I
So
got
you
one here
start.
too.
Oh, what a coincidence. So you started talking about experiences in the 90s, late 90s, I guess was the original published date.
Yep.
This one was
Yep.
2020, I believe.
Correct.
Um,
That's the third edition. The original one in 1999. We updated it in 2011, and then
and then,
again in 2020.
right. So what have you noticed since then? A lot has happened in the last 5 years. What have you noticed? What are you thinking about? What's on your mind right now?
Well, I several things. I used to when we first started talking about the experience economy, I used to have to argue with people that this was going on and that goods and services were being commoditized and people wanted experiences. And I don't have to anymore. I just say it and people immediately get it, right? Even they've never heard
Right.
of it, never thought about it, they immediately get that, yeah, we're shifting to experiences and people prefer experiences over things. The second big thing is the rise of digital technology. Obviously, since that time, and there's so many digital experiences that we have. We get on our phones to so that we feel like we're not wasting our time, but we can have a little bit of time well spent in between things, as well
Yeah.
as looking at how digitally infused experiences up to and including virtual reality. And the last thing I'll mention is I noticed it was something that accelerated with the pandemic. I mean, but it's always been around. Is people didn't want the merely memorable; they also wanted highly meaningful experiences. Right?
Yeah.
As we missed these experiences with our loved ones, our colleagues, our friends, and so forth, even complete strangers in movie theaters and arenas. We that's what we really missed in the pandemic that we couldn't do. So they're looking for more meaning from the experiences that they have, and that led to in part my next book, which will come out at the end of this year on transformative experiences. Experiences actually change us in some way, and that's I think a huge new opportunity for many companies, particularly in the travel space.
Yeah, and I love that word. And obviously, this is something that, in the travel space, we've been talking about meaningful travel, meaningful experiences for a little while too. But you're not just looking at travel, you have a broader perspective. And so, for you, when you think about experiences, how does tourism work into what you're thinking about?
Well, experiences have always been around, right? It's not, I didn't identify a new economic offering.
Yeah.
I just identified something that's always been there, right? And travel has always been a part of that. And in fact, tourism and travel, if you think about it, according to the WTO, is the world's largest industry in terms of employment. It employs a little over 10% of the entire population in this globe have something to do with travel and tourism. And so it's a huge sector of the experience economy. And therefore, it leads in many ways, and other companies take their cues. You think about how many retail stores now are designed after hotel experiences, for example. But it also means that it's got a target on its back because everybody else is getting into the experience business.
Yeah.
Right? All these companies are getting in the experience business, and so if you've been in that business for a long time, you really have to up your game. You have to increase the level of engagement, the level of meaning, and even shift into transformative experiences in order to stay ahead of the pack, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen that in like tours, activities, and attractions. You know, we used to be kind of just doing our own little thing over here, like, hey, experiences are fun. And now hotels want in, airlines want in, everyone wants a piece of it. And it's changing the game.
Yep.
So, meaningful travel, it seems obvious, right? It should mean something, but it is a shift from this idea of like just checking things off a bucket list to this needs to have value and purpose and meaning in my life.
Right.
So, from the context of experience design, how do you think about that? How do you design an experience that's not just a thing to do, but has some kind of meaning?
Well, I think of it this way: memorable experiences engage who you are, but meaningful experiences connect with who you are, right? In a way that goes beyond you. Obviously, it has to be memorable to begin with, or it's not an
Yeah.
experience at all. But how do you connect with people? And in a way, think about it as a sympathetic vibration that goes back and forth between them and whatever they're experiencing. And they say, yeah, that's me. That's what I'm about. And it's something that's authentic to them, and that's what helps create meaning in their lives. It also helps to be in tune with with individual guests or visitors in the travel experience, to understand where they're at, what's going on in their lives, and helping them connect with things that will go beyond just the mundane and the memorable, to create that sense of purpose and meaning in their lives. And I'll mention that then there's actually four levels of experience, right? Memorable and meaningful, but there's also transporting experiences. And these also are greatly supplied by travel, because when we transport out of who we are, right, we go
Yeah.
outside of ourselves and get into flow or have a transcendent experience, or have awe. And the easiest way to get awe is to be in front of God's creation and natural wonders that truly are awesome. And so those level of experiences that travel can provide perhaps better than any other industry. And then finally, the transformative experiences, experiences that change who we are, that reach inside of us and help us achieve our aspirations, help us become who we want to become. And travel is particularly appropriate for that because we're most open to change when we travel. When we get out of our quotidian lives and go out to
Yeah.
someplace different is when we feel that need. We resonate with different things, and we can find ourselves in situations where, yeah, look at that, what happened. And that's really meaningful to me. In fact, it's so meaningful, I want to take it home with me, and I want to become that. And that, I think, is a huge opportunity.
Yeah, and I wanna talk more about transformative experiences, and spoiler alert, I think that's what your next book is about, right?
Yes, yes.
But first, I think that there is a lot that people can learn from the travel sector regarding experiences, but are there things that experience industry, and by that I mean, like, travel experience folks can learn from other industries that also do experiences?
Yeah, always. One of the things I often encourage my clients to do is don't think about best practices, about copying what somebody else is doing, but think about best principles, right? Understanding what they're doing in their situation, extract out the principle and apply it to your situation. And that enables you to come up with new ideas that you otherwise would not have. And there's many things that many industries do particularly well. Two that come immediately to mind is one, thinking about directing workers to act, right? That when you stage an experience, your workers are on stage, right? They need to perform on your business stage in a way that engages the audience. And you learn from folks like the Geek Squad, where they costume their employees in the white shirts with the thin black ties. The ties are clip on just in case there's an altercation. They got black pants and white socks that really make that uniform pop. They drive around in their geek mobiles, these black and white Beetles that look like squad cars. And they get to your home or to your offices. The first thing they do is they pull out their badge and say, "Hi, I'm from the Geek Squad." Slowly step away from that computer, ma'am. And they go about giving you a computer repair experience, right? So how do you apply that notion of, okay, they're costuming, how do we costume?
Yeah.
They're acting, how do we act in art? And I think that's incredibly important to be able to do in travel. The other one that will sound a little, well, if some parts of the travel industry, it's like, well, yeah, of course. Other parts of like sounds a little crazy. And it's a part of the book probably that we got the most crazy comments on when we first came out with it, and that is that you should charge admission for the experience. I mean,
Right.
look at traditional industry. You would never go to a sporting event or a movie or a play or a concert or a theme park without expecting to pay admission. But
Right.
yet we go to destinations and we don't pay admission for them, even though they are experiences in and of themselves. The airlines view that they are giving us the service of going from point A to point B instead of recognizing the potential of, no, this is an admission fee for an experience we're going to give you for the time that you're traveling, including
Yeah.
before and after. Same with hotels. They charge a rack rate, right, for a room, but don't recognize that, hey, what if we treated this as an admission fee? And it's the same thing with hotel taxes and destination taxes and things like that. If they could, the first destination that I ever saw do this, because it's actually private, so they get away with it more easily, perhaps. But that's a 17-mile drive in Pebble Beach, where
Oh,
you
okay.
right you pay admission, right? One of the most beautiful areas you'll ever encounter in the world. It's 17 miles that you're driving on. You pay not per person but per vehicle. Last time I was there, it was $10.50. I mean, the first time I was there, I think it was $2 way back when, and they raised that commensurate with how much demand that they have. And then you see, well, that's exactly what Venice is doing, where they're now charging admission to get into the city center, and they can dynamically price that based on how many people are there. And what do they do with that money? They can use that money to help support the city, to help keep the floodwaters out, and so forth. But nobody is going to object to that because they recognize this is a place worth experiencing. And that's what an admission fee does. It sends a signal that this is a place worth experiencing. And so every company in the experience business should recognize that. And I mean, obviously, many travel companies are charging that admission, but what would you do differently if you treated what your customers are paying you as an admission fee?
Right. I think that's a great way of looking at it. It's kind of like paying park fees, like national
Yeah.
parks type fees. A lot of places have. Canada has. I know there's some places that don't, but it's a similar concept. For travel experience providers specifically, tours and activities and attractions, it's a little bit different than some of the other experiences you talk about. Like, you talk about the Starbucks experience,
Mhm.
and people keep coming back to Starbucks, not just for the coffee, but because of the experience. But for travel brands, it can be hard to keep people coming back because sometimes they only visit one time. And so I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on how brands can, is it possible to have brand loyalty when people are maybe only visiting one time?
Yeah, well, I suppose by definition, the answer is no if they only ever visit one time. But you want to
Yeah.
create a preference for them to come back and maybe instigations for them to come back, as well as to tell other people about it so other people come back. And one of the best ways of doing that is to get very personal with them, to customize what you offer to them. And that will allow you to turn mundane service activities into engaging encounters. Right. If you get to know them and then you show what you know and that you do things differently based on what you know, then the chances that they come back and be loyal are much, much higher. It's also better if you go up this sort of progression of memorable to meaningful to transporting to transformative. And
Yeah.
particularly if you are somebody where they had a transformation, right? That's just not a memory, right? You've changed them. And that's going to be a deep impact on their psyche that's going to make them want to come back. In fact, you can think about, how do I like bolster that by why you come back, and then we'll recharge that transformation that you had. We'll help you boost you to the next transformation that you want. I think then it becomes easier as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like as you're saying this, I'm like, oh, I could do a testimonial for this because I went to New Zealand for reasons of, going through a major life crisis and needing to figure out things. And I had what you would define as a transformational experience. Like, life has not looked the same since that New Zealand experience. And I joked that New Zealand ruined traveling for me because before going to New Zealand, had this whole list of places I wanted to go. And after my New Zealand trip, I was like, well, I just want to go back to New Zealand.
There you
So,
go. It's exactly what I'm talking about. That's beautiful. How can
yeah.
we make that happen for more and more travelers?
Yeah, and I've been there 3 times, and each time it's been, it's been like a progression of what the
Yeah,
transformational
well, I've
stuff
only
that
been
I've
there
been
twice.
working
Now
on.
I'm jealous.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that. How can you make experiences not just fun? And some experiences are just fun and that's fine. You go
Right.
ziplining and you're like, that was a fun time. Unless you're on some journey of overcoming your fear of heights, it's probably just going to be a fun memory. But some experiences are transformational. So how can you approach that from a design perspective?
Well, one way is to hit what we call the sweet spot of the experience. So you talk about fun, right? So that's basically an
Yeah.
entertainment experience, right? One that's fun that we enjoy. But there's also educational, escapist, and aesthetic experiences. This is our 4E model, as we call it. And the best experiences are those that hit the sweet spot in the middle, that have aspects of all four of those. And so that makes it a much more robust experience is when you have all four of those and mix them into the experience, fuse them together so you can't even tell which one you're in. That's when you're really, truly in the sweet spot. And so you might think about whatever is your center of gravity today, right? Generally, you tend towards one. Well, think about escape rooms, right? Escape rooms are
Yeah.
obviously escapist. And so
Right.
they immerse people in a very active experience. But a big part of the value is the entertainment value of watching people make mistakes and trying to figure out how it's going on. And the educational value, you've got to learn a lot to be able to skate. You got to look all around and search and things and pull things together. There's some logic involved, there's some pattern recognition and so forth to pull all the clues together of what you have to do next, all within an aesthetic environment that immerses you in a different time, a different place, and so forth. So all of those allow that you start off in the escapist realm, but then grow into all of the others and become more robust. And each one of those can be actually a way of sparking transformation. With entertainment realm of experience, it's often a viewpoint transformation that you can do by engaging them in the entertainment. With educational, it's often a change in understanding of the world or of themselves, of relationships, of particular topics and subjects. With escapist experience, it's often a change in capability. Do things differently than we could before. And then with aesthetic, it's about really a change in appreciation and how you appreciate the world and what's going on, or different activities and thoughts and places. So all of those can yield a transformation inside of individual guests.
When you say transformation, can you define that from your perspective?
Sure. All transformation is identity change. So it's
Mm.
basically changing your identity. And the way I like to think of it is if you're able to say, I was X, now I am Y. Right. So
Right.
that's a transformation, right? I was a student in college. Now I'm a graduate working at someplace else. I was a cubicle worker. Now I'm an entrepreneur, right? Those are big sort of metamorphosis transformations that we have. But
Yeah.
it could be simply that I was not a gardener. Now I am a gardener. I learned how to garden. Or I was very harried and anxious, and now I'm a meditator, right? And I'm into meditation, like things that you can do in travel. I was anxious, and then I had a spa, and now I'm relaxed, right? So some of those blend into changes in states as opposed to changes in identity. But if you can move people into a state of relaxment that then carries with them, then it becomes who they are, and they're no longer
Right.
that anxious person.
So I think the key there is how do you make it carry on? Because
Right.
in the context of an experience, especially if it's something like whether it's a visit to Starbucks or a day tour, a walking tour, or a kayak tour, you only have them for a short period of time. So, how do you design something to be going beyond meaningful, actually transformational in a way that is going to impact them on
So
the longer term?
the key is what I call encapsulation. And this has a lot of academic research behind it, and there are different terms. But encapsulation is basically, you think about the experience. Now I'm going to encapsulate it inside of what you do beforehand, which is preparation. How do you prepare them for the experience? How do you prime them to have a transformative experience? And that could be as easy as them thinking about, well, what things do you want to change in your life? And
Right.
then you have the experience. And then reflection. Okay, what did you really get out of it? What is the high point of the experience? What was there some particular part that gave you meaning, that transported you? And is there any that you might want to take home with you and be someone different when you get home? And then the final part of encapsulation is integration, where you integrate it into other people's lives. And that's where most companies that putatively should be in the transformation business fall down. Because like, okay, you leave our destination, you can do a wonderful job of preparation when you arrive or beforehand. You do a wonderful job of reflection. At the end of every day, let's reflect. At the end of the entire time, let's reflect. And people can really recognize, oh, wow, I am changed. But then it shows over, ride's done, go home, right? Goodbye. And so you don't get that integration. You just stick with them afterwards to be able to do that.
Yeah, and so how do you build that in? Or maybe a better question is, do you have an example of someone that you've seen has done that really well, really effectively?
Well, one company I'll point to is a travel design company, I think they call themselves, called Explorer X. And Explorer X is founded by Michael Bennett out in the Seattle area, I believe. And
Okay.
they use basically the hero's journey, right? If you've heard of that hero's
Yeah.
journey to design this. So when you call them and want to have an experience, they view that as a call to adventure. And now we're going to design experiences. Some people specifically call for transformational experiences, travel
Yeah.
experiences. Others, they're not specifically saying they just want to have this great high-end experience. But Michael and his team designed into it these opportunities for transformation as they go on. And they fit that encapsulation in. They prepare them ahead of time for it. They have reflection exercises. What they do is they give them toolkits basically that allow them to reflect and begin to integrate while they're on experience, and then a toolkit after they leave to be able to integrate that into their lives. And people often come to them for multiple travel experiences, so then you can build on top of those. The integration of one becomes the preparation for the next, and so forth.
Yeah. So what excites you most about transformational experiences in the context of travel? What's the big opportunity there, do you think?
I think there's a huge opportunity for companies to create much more economic value, therefore be able to charge more for transformations as opposed to mere experiences. If they explicitly get into that business, some people only want the experience, but for those that do, thinking about how you design an experience for them and allow them to achieve it. Because again, there's no better place than when we travel. When we get out of our daily lives and open ourselves up to new vistas, new areas and arenas of exploration, then the chances that we can change go way up. And so that's the opportunity that's in front of travel companies today, is to really take advantage of the shift now from the experience economy into the transformation economy.
And so that's kind of the next big thing that
Yes, yes. And
yeah.
the name of the book coming out at the end of the year. No coincidence.
No
No
coincidence.
coincidence.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. Okay, so that was such a great conversation with Joe. I wanted to keep talking
Hmm.
to him forever. He's such a fascinating person to talk to, and I'm so excited for him to be in person at Arrival in DC in September/October. But for you, what was your impression of the conversation? What jumped out to you from that interview?
Yeah, I think the whole idea of the sea of same, or when you're looking at, for example, Colosseum tours in Rome and you get 800 results on an OTA. I think the challenge that we face with buying through OTAs in general, or buying through marketplaces, is that you end up with that conundrum of choice, and you are limited to it becomes partly a race to the bottom because you're looking for both convenience and price, but you lose the ability to really differentiate yourselves. So I think the key here, and this is something that we do at the Arrival conference all the time, is how do you differentiate yourself in these marketplaces and really stand out as offering something different from everyone else? Because if somebody is just looking for Coliseum tickets, how do you differentiate yourself when you offer so much more than just that? And that's a real challenge. We've almost gone kind of step backwards in terms of experience design. Do you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like everybody's working so hard to make their experience the best possible experience. And they're including all these really innovative and cool things into their experiences. But then when you shove it all into a can and put it on a shelf next to 500 other cans of soup, your soup just ends up being another can of soup. So there's only so much you can do with a label on a can of soup to make it enticing for a consumer. So I think that's where we really have to look at, once you have that customer, how do you extend that experience beyond just what you're giving them in the destination, the whole idea of the expand, and how do you offer something that's truly transformational? Because when you do offer something that's transformational, those people will talk about it, and they
Yeah.
will they will spread it by word of mouth, and those people, they probably won't go to the OTA to book it. They'll look for it direct, or they'll search for it directly and drive more direct bookings. So I
Yeah,
think.
no, it's true. Like, as you know, and anyone who knows me knows, I don't shut up about New Zealand. And that trip was
Mm-hmm.
that was like, I don't know, 8 years ago now, I think my initial trip to New Zealand, but it was such a life-changing experience for me that I still to this day, it the joke is that New Zealand ruined traveling for me because yeah, while I do go other places, I always just want to go back to New Zealand.
It
And
becomes the benchmark.
yeah, it is. It's the benchmark.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's the dream, right? For operators and for destinations is how do you become that for people? How do you become that thing that they just can't forget about, that they won't stop talking to all their friends about, that brings in more people to do your experience or to visit your destination?
Mm-hmm. And I think the $1 million question is, how do you sell that? Right? How do you
Yeah.
sell that? How do you make that apparent beforehand? Like doing this one food tour is great. It's a fun food tour and you're gonna get to taste like five different things. But this other food tour that looks almost exactly the same, that's maybe $10 more expensive, is, the best experience you're ever going to have on a food tour in this place. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you don't know that. You have
Yeah.
no idea about that until you actually do it.
Yeah.
And how do you sell that difference? It's really hard.
Yeah, and this reminds me of a conversation I had recently with Brian from Blend Travel Marketing. And there's an
Mm-hmm.
article we did an article about it, so we can put that link in the comments, but we're talking about exactly this. You know,
Mm-hmm.
commoditization is happening. How can operators differentiate themselves in the sea of same? And he talks about, how to stand out online, how to make your listing stand out, how to differentiate yourself in this sea of very similar looking products and experiences. He's got some great tips in there. So we don't need to go into the list here, but we will put the link in the show notes. And there's some video clips of him sharing his tips as well in that article.
Mm-hmm. One of the other things that came up was the whole idea that, and you talked about this with Joe, is that you only do an experience once
Yeah.
generally, right? And so there's no real brand loyalty, right? Unless the brand is like a secret food tours, or a walks devour tour where they offer tours in different destinations
Yeah.
that you
Those
may go to,
multi
those multi
location
destination
brands. Yeah.
types. That makes sense. And to be fair, that's who I go back to because I trust the brand and because I know the quality of the tours is really good. But if you're a single operator and you only exist in a single location, the likelihood that you're going to get repeat customers is very low. The benefit that the OTAs bring is that they will have repeat customers because repeat
Hmm.
customers will come back. And so they have more of an opportunity to build experience design into their customer experience to make it better for consumers to find products that really make sense for them and that will drive that passion for them. I think the problem right now is that they don't really do a great job of it right now. It's very much just like an Amazon shopping cart of 500 things to do in every destination, and you just sort of have to go through and pick one.
Yeah. And this is probably a whole other podcast topic, but personalization is coming to that. And they're
Mm-hmm.
talking about how to use AI for personalization and
Yeah.
how to change that, how to fix that problem.
Yeah.
But I feel like
That's one that has been going. Yeah, that has been
yeah,
the personalization and customization have been something that people have been trying to tackle for a long time. And finally, AI is, I think, giving us an opportunity to actually play around with that more meaningfully.
yeah. But so some great thoughts from this conversation with Joe. Um,
Mm-hmm.
super excited to have him in DC and to get into this more and to see his new book as well, The Transformation Economy, coming out um, soon. So look for that. We'll put the link in the comments. I just I just love this conversation. And this is a topic I can go on about for a while. I just
Mm-hmm.
it's why I came to tourism. This topic is why I came to tourism. It was me being on that trip in New Zealand, feeling like I had this really life-changing experience, and then deciding to become a tour guide so that I could try to help facilitate those types of life-changing experiences for other people. That's what got me into it. But the question of how to design those, how
Mm-hmm.
from an operator's perspective, from an experience design perspective, that's a really interesting one. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to get more into that and see, what is the next step beyond things, beyond experiences, what comes next, and how can we be at the forefront of that as a sector?
Yeah. I mean, just as kind of a closing comment for me, I think transformation is is aspirational,
Hmm.
but it's hard to make it intentional, right? Like part of the reason why New Zealand was so transformative for you was because of the place that you were in your life.
Yeah.
I had a very similar experience the first time I went to Australia, and I did a surfing lesson. It was a 2 hour surf lesson, and I had a really negative experience with that surf lesson. But it was transformational for me because what I got out of that surf lesson was just what you talked about with the bungee jump, right? Was that I couldn't do that surf lesson because I wasn't at a point in my life where physically I could do that surf lesson.
Right.
And it was transformative for me because it informed me that I needed to change my physical being. I needed to become healthy and fit if I wanted to be able to take advantage of these opportunities that came my way that are once in a lifetime opportunities. When am I going to get to surf at Bondi Beach again? I
Yeah.
haven't.
Yeah.
That was
But
15 years
but
ago,
but
right?
we did go surfing last year in
Yes.
Ensenada, and you were able to
Yes.
do very well with it. We even did a surf
Yes.
high five. So
Yes,
so
exactly.
you
And
did it.
the reason why we were able to do that and why I was able to do that was because of the transformation that occurred 15 years ago at that beach in Bondi, right? That had nothing to do with the surf lesson. That had
Yeah.
everything to do with the context of the surf lesson and where I was in my life. And I think how do we, how do we trigger those things in people? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a much larger sort of existential question, but
Yeah.
but I think there are things that operators can do to help facilitate some of that, and I'll be really interested to see what Joe has to say about that in his new book.
Yeah, so super excited to have Joe Pine in person, live in person at Arrival in Washington, D.C. in September/October. And he's also going to be speaking at the Executive Summit, which is happening in conjunction with that event. So hope that you guys can join us in D.C.
Yeah, thanks, Janelle. And I think that brings us to the end of this episode. So be sure to follow and share this podcast with your friends. Check out Arrival 360, the DC conference, and the Executive Summit at Arival.Travel to find out when Joe Pine is going to be speaking. And yeah, thanks for joining us for another episode of The Best Part of Travel.